Morning everybody, and welcome to our second webinar on drone operations. My name's John Franklin, I'm Head of Safety Promotion here at EASA, and I'm joined here by my colleague Natalie De Rubio.
Good morning.
Who's one of our drone projects officers.
Good morning.
So what we're going to do particularly today is to focus this discussion on drone operations conducted for business purposes. So we're going to start with some initial overview from Natalie, and then we're going to take questions and all these kinds of things. So what you can do is go to slido.com and use the number 4389. Then you'll be able to ask your questions, and then also to up and down vote other people's questions as well. Then what we'll do is we'll take the questions kind of as the most popular ones, we'll try and group them into sections so we don't bounce around too much from one to another. So before we really get started, the first thing I want to do is just give a few thanks, otherwise we'll forget and it'll come at the end. So first of all, huge thanks to Natalie and Laurie Anako from our drones team here at EASA, particularly from Tom Newhut from our communications department, and also from our safety promotion colleague Antonio Gonzalez Gomez, and particularly also thanks to Marcus Eiserman and Amir Wadahi from the supporting company who are helping us make sure this live stream runs as perfectly as it will. So before we really get into the subject of drones, it's possible that, potentially likely, that some of you might not be so familiar with the aviation world and who we are as EASA as an organisation. So EASA itself, we're the European Union Aviation Safety Agency. We're based here in this building you see on the screen near the main station in the centre of the German city of Cologne. Our role is that we're responsible as the authority for aviation regulations in Europe, for the oversight of national aviation authorities, for making sure that European skies are the safest, as safe as they possibly can be. So that's our role, and as part of that role, looking after aviation in Europe, we've obviously been leading the work on the European drones regulations that we're here to talk about today. So hopefully you know these rules have now been adopted by the European Commission, and will be applicable from the 31st of December this year. And these rules will apply to the European Union member states, and also in Switzerland, Norway and Iceland. So hopefully this map here gives you a clear idea what we're talking about. So that gives you a bit of background what we're here to do. And now I'm going to turn to Natalie. So we're here focusing on business operations. Does the regulation provide different requirements for commercial and leisure flights?
So actually, John, no. There is no different requirements for leisure or commercial flight. Also because at the end, I'm not interested if someone is posing a risk to me or to property, if it is flying for leisure or for commercial. We always need to protect the citizens and the other airspace user in the same way. So the regulation provides always the same requirements if you are commercial or if you are flying for leisure. However, as we saw yesterday, there was the open category that was defined in a way to be very simple in order to allow users to do some operation without the burden of asking authorization. So as we saw yesterday, if you are able to fly in visual line of sight below 120 meters, and either in the city or outside the city, according to what kind of drone you have, as you say, we saw yesterday, then you can do all the operation in the open category, and we expect that the leisure flight will mostly be in the open category. Now, if for some reason you want to do something more than the limitation in the open, then you are in the specific. Regarding instead the commercial flight, the open category also fits for the commercial flights. As a matter of fact, for example, if you remember yesterday, we were discussing about the A2 category, where you can fly with a drone up to 4 kilo with a distance up to 5 meters from people. So in this case, while you are using a drone with a class C2, you can, for example, do some very nice operation for a photographer, for example, or something like that. And still you can do this operation without asking any authorization if you are complying with the requirements in DA2. Or, for example, if you want to do an inspection of a bridge or a windmill, and this is located outside of the town in an area where there is no one, you can do this operation in the open category, in the A3, with a quite heavy drone, 25 kilos, also without asking any kind of authorization. Now, when instead for professional we expect that the operation requirements in the open category can be a little bit more restrictive, so you want to do something more, then your operation will fit in the specific category. So the specific category, for examples, are all operations that go at a distance such that you cannot see your drone anymore. So we call this one beyond visual line of sight. Or, for example, if you need to fly at a height higher than 120 meters, or you want to use a drone that is heavier, or example also for the purpose of dropping material. In this case, you need to conduct the risk assessment, we'll see maybe later, and you need to ask for authorization from your competent authority.
So let's assume that I want to start a company doing some aerial works for drones. What should I do?
Yeah, so if you need to do this kind of operation, first of all, we require that all drones, all operators that are flying in open, but also in the specific, are registered. So you need to register yourself using the same approach we discussed yesterday. So in reality, you need to register all the time you are using a drone that has a weight either higher than 250 grams or below 250 grams, but still with a camera or other sensor able to capture personal data. So the registration is always mandatory. Then, second thing, is better to you check if you can do your operation in the open category. If instead you cannot do the operation in the open category, then really the specific category is what you need to search for. Now, for the specific category, you may see in the regulation, there are no prescriptive requirements. I think this is the first case where we develop a full risk-based approach. We are covering here different kind of operations. So from, I don't know, a 5-kilo drones flying in the city to a very large drone flying over the sea, for example, where maybe the risks are comparable. So the focus of the regulation is to give you a methodology on how to organize your operation in the best way you think that it should be accomplished. So it's up to you to propose to the competent authority how you want to do your operation that could be safe and could be also effective for your business. So the regulation identify the need for the operator to conduct a risk assessment. Now, there are several methodologies to conduct risk assessment. In the regulation, we propose one methodology that is called SORA, Specific Operation Risk Assessment, that has been developed with an international group that was led by JARUS, so by EASA, that is called JARUS, and where also the American, for example, participated, or the Chinese authority, or all the other European authority as well. So it's quite an important piece of work that now is going to be shared by all other authorities in the world. So this document you can find in our EASA access rule that is published on the EASA website. So how does it work? It is a methodology that helps the operator to identify what is the risk of their operation. So first of all, the operator needs to define what we call the CONOPS, the concept of operation. So how you want to operate, identifying where you want to operate. For example, let's assume that you want to do an operation to transport some medical equipment between two hospitals. So you need to identify the area that you are going to overflow, what kind of population density is there. Maybe you can identify a different path, not going straight forward, because maybe, for example, in the middle there is some shopping center. So maybe you find a path that will reduce the people at risk during flight. So this already allow you to identify some kind of mitigations. Then you identify what is the risk, the air risk. So the risk of finding other airspace user. And at the end, this methodology allows you to identify an index of your operation. It goes from 1 to 6. And according to this index, you need to comply with the safety objectives that are defined in the regulation. And you can propose the best way you think that you can comply with this one. So you then prepare all the documentation to be sent to your competent authority. Your competent authority review the way you are proposing the operation, and if they are content, they approve the authorization, and then you can start the operation.
So that sounds like quite a flexible process. You know, that way the requirements mean that an operator can define their needs on a case-by-case basis, and they'll actually be able to propose requirements taking into account exactly what it is they're doing with their drone. Now, you know, in one of the things I know already, you know, there's some concern perhaps from people that that's not so much of an easy process to do, particularly if you're a small organisation. Did you consider this?
Yeah. So now we know that we are talking about a potential risk of hitting a person in the city, or also a risk of hitting an aircraft. So you can imagine that this can be quite an important event, and we need to prevent it. So this means that the risk assessment needs to be conducted in a way such that we consider all different elements, and there are several elements to be considered. So we expect that can be a little bit difficult especially for the smallest operator to conduct this assessment in the right way. So this is why we defined some other simplification. So the first simplification is what we call predefined risk assessment, or PDRA, you can see in our documents. So these predefined risk assessment are some defined operation that we analyze. When I say we, I mean EASA, with the support of all European member states. So it's a document that is published still as a acceptable means of compliance in the easy access rule, where we will see that we identify the limits of the operation, and then EASA conducted the risk assessment, and we did a sort of a pre-application of the SORA. So we identified there some ways to conduct safely the operation. So you can check this document, see if your operation fits with the limits of this document, and then you can adapt some of the mitigation and the way we propose to comply with the safety objective to fit better to your operation. Then still you need to ask for an authorization to your competent authority, but the process will be much simplified. First of all, because you don't need to go to all the process of SORA, and also because the competent authority on the other side will receive a document that is already framed within this predefined risk assessment. So also for them will be easier to assess and give you the authorization. At this moment, we published only one. It was published within the first edition of the acceptable means of compliance. But really, these days, I hope by Monday, we are going to publish a new decision by EASA where we are going to introduce 3 additional predefined risk assessments, and we already have 2 more that are almost complete. So we'll propose in a proposal for amendment that will come beginning of next year. And our intent is to develop as much as possible. We would like to cover the vast majority of the operation in Europe in order to make sure that the instances in which you need to conduct the risk assessment called SORA will be very limited. Now, so this is the main way to simplify the operation with the predefined risk assessment. We thought that maybe we could even include another more simplified process, and this is what we call standard scenario. Now, standard scenario are another kind of scenario like the predefined risk assessment that I mentioned before, but now we are talking about only those covering operations that are, let's say, of lower risk, so with an index maximum 1 or 2. In this case, since we are talking about operations that are not so complex, say in the way they are organized, we allow to do the operation not asking for an authorization, but just sending a declaration to the competent authority. The standard scenario that was published at this moment are two, and they are appendix to the regulation, so you can find as an appendix. And you need to, in this case, comply exactly with all the requirements that are written in the regulation, in the appendix, and you need to send to the competent authority a declaration according to the form that is also in the regulation. And then you don't need to wait for the assessment from the competent authority, but only for a receipt confirmation, so the confirmation that the competent authority received the declaration, and they check it is complete. Then you can operate. But have in mind that as soon as the competent authority will receive this declaration, also when they issue an authorization, the competent authority will add all operator in their oversight program. So this means that they may come to you to check if you are doing everything according to the regulation, either the following day, for example, or later. So this will be based on what is the perception of risk of the competent authority on the operation that you are doing. One last possibility is the light US unmanned certificate, we call LUC. So this is a voluntary application for the operator where they can ask to the competent authority to assess the structure. So also here there is a part in the regulation, that is a part C, that are dedicated to what are the requirements that the LUC need to show. So there is need to, for example, show some requirements based on the SMS, Safety Management System. So the idea is that the operator will demonstrate to the competent authority that he has a structure such that he can assess the risk of the operation. So when it is authorized by the competent authority, he can receive some privileges. And then based on the maturity of the operation, the LUC organization can self-authorize their own operation. So with a different level of risk based on what the competent authority will define. So they can start the operation immediately as soon as they receive the approval of the LUC and they internally assess the risk.
Okay, maybe now is, so we've got quite a few questions, and maybe we cover this just quickly now, in terms of the standard scenarios.
Okay.
Are there going to be more than the current two? Maybe we answer that and cover that.
Yes, sure. The standard scenario, at this moment, the one that we developed was based on the experience that we already have in some member states, especially those in Spain and in France, where they already were doing this operation using a declaration. We are at the beginning of this new process. As I told you, it's the first time that we are developing a flexible regulation where we really try to reduce the burden to the operator. So we need to make sure that we don't do something that is over risky. So the first two that we developed was based on the experience that we already had in these two nations. So we refer also to gain some experience with the pre-defined risk assessment, and as soon as we will see that there are some operations that are conducted by the member state, by the operator, in a safe way, we can transform in the standard scenario. So at this moment, no, we don't have any in the pipeline in the next couple of years. But as soon as we will have something that is we consider safe enough, we will transform in the standard scenario.
And of course, we can always use our safety promotion process to support people, provide information to help people anyway, so we don't kind of leave them with nothing. So we'll be looking and seeing what other supporting material we can give in addition. So one of the common asked questions I know we get is, do drones that operate in the specific category specifically require a certificate of airworthiness?
Yeah, this is an important point. As I told you yesterday, we do not have any requirements for use drone with a certificate of airworthiness and the type certificate issued by EASA for the open category. But for the specific category, we may have. So, for example, I said you that the risk assessment allow the operator to identify the, let's say, risk level of the operation, even if maybe risk is not the appropriate word, but for simplification, I would like to call it the index that you receive at the end, an index of the risk of your operation. So we can have operations that are low risk, medium risk, or high risk. So low risk is most index 1 or 2. medium risk 3 and 4, and high risk 5 and 6. Typically, when you are having an operation in the low risk, the operator is only required to declare that he comply with all the requirements, all the operational safety objective, or the other technical mitigation, so without having any kind of verification. When instead we are having an operation in the high risk, there is always the necessity to have a third-party verification from someone. Now, I know that I receive a lot of questions on who is this third-party verification. In Europe, there is a split of competence between the member state and in Europe. It is defined by one regulation that we call basic regulation. So this regulation says that Europe is in charge to verify the design of all aircraft, so including drones. And Europe does this activity through EASA. So this means that a third-party verification of the design means that there is a type certificate issued by EASA. Instead, the states are in charge of the verification of the operational requirements and the pilot competency requirements. So this means that they will either check directly if you are complying with all the requirements, or if or maybe they can use a qualified entity or another organization that they recognize as competent to do this kind of activity to conduct it. When instead we talk in the medium risk, here, the medium risk, so the operation cell 3 and cell 4, regarding the type certificate, the regulation does not mandate always to have a type certificate, but we think that it will be better to give the possibility to the competent authority to decide when. For example, there are some operations here in the medium category that can be quite risky, and also for public perception, here we may talk of an operation over a city. So this is, for example, if we are conducting a transport of a good from place A to place B, I think that people would like to make sure that a drone is verified by someone else. Mm. So this is why we are suggesting that also the operation in the medium risk should have a type certificate. But I want to reassure you that when we talk about the certification of the drones in the medium risk, we will not going to apply the full certification process as a Part 21, as maybe you are familiar that we are going to use for the big aircraft. We are going to develop a new regulation that we'll propose next year, where we are going to reduce the requirements, the certification process requirements for the drones operated in medium risk to make it really proportionate. So it will be a sort of Part 21 light version. Mm. And since this regulation will then be proposed next year, will be maybe become applicable, I don't know, in a couple of years, by the end of this year, we are going to publish on our website a document that will already identify how, within the current regulation that we have today, we can already provide a very proportionate approach for the certification of drones. So today, we can already certify all drones in the medium risk with a proportionate approach. And also, all manufacturers can also decide to ask for a certificate over their drone, either because they know that the drones will be operated in a risk class where the competent authority will ask for a certificate, or also because for commercial reason, maybe it could be also more appealing if they put on the market a drone already with a certificate issued by EASA, so then the operator may be more convinced to buy it and use, then it will be easier for them to operate this kind of drones.
Now, I know certainly for me, one of the most exciting parts of the new regulation is that if you have an authorization or a certification in one member state, it's valid in another. Now, tell people how does that work?
Yeah, so as we said yesterday, the basic elements of this regulation is that we need to have a full recognition among the member states. So whatever authorization, training, registration you do one state should be valid in all other member states. And so this is very important when we talk about an authorization that you get in the specific category. I told you that the process requires that you do the risk assessment, and then you apply for an authorization from your competent authority, and your competent authority give you the the authorization to fly in that state. So let's assume that you have this authorization, and then you want to do the operation in a different state. I told you that you may identify some mitigation to reduce the level of risk of your operation. For example, if we go back to the operation of the drone transporting medical equipment between two hospitals in the city, instead of going straight through, they may have a different path. For example, here in the picture that you see in the slide, for example, you may use the path of a river to reduce the exposure to risk from people in case there is, for example, an accident, a crash of the drone. So this will allow you to reduce the level of the risk of the operation and also to reduce the cost of your operation, because maybe you don't need to have a very expensive drone. So if you have an authorization to do this operation and you want to do the same operation in another city, then you need to find an equivalent path that will still have this kind of low risk. For example, if you see in the second part of the slide, you may still find the river, but maybe then you can try to reach the river flying over some parks, some areas that are inhabited. So you need to modify the mitigation measures to comply with the configuration of the new location, and also potentially with some local conditions that the member state has published for that location. So when you want to do the operation in the second state, you will send to the competent authority of the state of operation a copy of your authorization with all the risk assessment and the identification of how you modified your mitigation measure to fit the new risk in the second city. The competent authority of the member state of operation will not check again your risk assessment. So if the mitigation needs to be done in a certain way, they will not judge if the mitigation were correct or not. They will only judge if you applied the mitigation in the second city in the correct way. So this means that they will just verify the last bit, a small bit of your authorization, nothing more. And then will authorize you to do the operation also in the second member state.
Okay, that's all good. And then, so I understand now that there's the limit. Anything that's not in the open category fits into the specific category. But then, what's the upper limit of the specific category? Where does that go into then the certified category? Yeah.
So also here we try to use a flexible approach. So we don't have any clear cut on what are the operations fitting in the specific or in the certified. So we decided for the open, since we allow the operation without any kind of verification from the competent authority, we want to be very clear. So I showed you that we are a very prescriptive framework. Here instead will be based on what is the risk of the operation. If when you conduct the risk assessment, you will not be able to identify enough mitigation measure such that you fit in the specific category, then you are in the certified category. So what is the certified category? What is the definition? Certified category are those kind of operations that where the risk is quite higher. So we are talking about something similar to what we have today in the manned aviation, where the only way to conduct the operation is by having a certificate of airworthiness of your drone, a certificate for the operator, a sort of something similar to the air operator certificate, like we have in the manned aircraft framework, and a license of your pilot. Now, maybe in the future, the level of automation will increase, and we may have some autonomous aircraft where the pilot interventions will not be possible anymore, but this is something that will come. I think we need to still have a lot of to do, especially from the technology point of view. So we need to have these three items to fit it in the certified category. So since we said we don't have any clear cut of what is in the certified category, we can already give some example. For example, if you are flying with a large drone over an assembly of people, so we are talking about more than 3 meters, so this is, for example, is a 2-meter drone, but also with this kind of drone over a stadium, for example, then you probably will be in certified category, because in case a drone like this will crash over the stadium, may pose risk to several people. The same will be in case you are transporting people, because we need to remember that drones in the future will also be used as aero taxi. So in this case, we will always be certified. And also when we are transporting dangerous goods, but only in case of accident they pose risk to third party. So what do we mean? We may today already transport dangerous goods, maybe also for the vaccine, for example, or what is needed for all the vaccines. We can still use the drone in the specific category, but what we require that will be a container that is able to withstand the load, such that in case the drone will crash over an area, now if it's crashing, means that it can only fly over an area that is not habitated. Yeah. Then will not spill the dangerous goods. So we prevent the environmental risk. Yeah. So if you are able to have this kind of container, you can do the operation in the specific category. If instead you cannot demonstrate that the container is so resistant, so you need to do the operation in specific category, because we need to make sure that there is no crash of the drone. And for the certificate category, we are going to publish some proposals for modifying the regulation. And here will be quite a huge work. So starting from 2022, we are going to publish a number of proposals of amendment to all the regulations that are today affecting the manned aviation, to make them fit also for the unmanned. So it's something that will come in the next future.
Okay, hopefully that people found that really, really useful. So what we're going to do now is go to the Slido and go through some of the questions. So don't forget to go in and vote for questions you think would be more useful, particularly if you see where there might be questions already that's the same as something you might want to know. Kind of don't forget to think about upvoting those, because we've got an awful lot of questions now, and we'll go through as many as we can. Where there are questions we don't get the time to, what we'll also do is we'll group those and provide answers on the EASA website as quickly as we can. So it's not that if we don't get to your question, it's just lost and you won't find it at all. We've got a couple of comments. Apparently we're so excited we're talking a little bit fast. So there's a couple of people, as we go through the questions, have asked if we could talk a little bit slower, which would be useful. So the first question we've got is from Jakob, who asks, from Anders, who says, where would you find the training syllabus for a remote pilot according to Article 8 of the regulation?
So the training, we identified in a prescriptive way only those requirements that are for the open category. So then you can find all the syllabus in the regulation and also in our AMC. Regarding the specific category, we are still using a flexible approach. So this means that it will be up to you to identify what is the best training that will fit for your operation. So at this moment, you don't find any kind of very detailed syllabus. However, we are now working on defining some modules, the syllabus on some modules, because possibly they will be some operation. They may require, for example, a module for communication with the tower, a module for operating in controlled airspace, or other. So we are going to propose in the proposal of amendment to our settlement means of compliance that will be published beginning of next year, also the syllabus of some modules. And little by little we are going to increase the number of settlements of compliance, including also the training, and so will be based on the experience that we will gain from applying the operations.
Okay, and then a follow-up, well, not necessarily a follow-up question, but an associate question about rules and where people can find information. Somebody asks, will there be an easy way to find information if I wanted to start a drone training school, for example? Where would I find information about how to do that in the regulation?
So most of this material is in the settlement means of compliance or in the guidance material that we published within the easy access rule. The regulation in reality only identify the request for the operator to assess the risk and to identify what are the safety objectives that can be used to demonstrate that the operation is safe. And we have in the SORA, I think 3 or 4 safety objectives that are linked to the training. But you can see that if you go to the SORA, the objectives are very high level, just define what is the performance. We are now going to assess some standards that are already available. And so we are going in the next future to publish also here some acceptable means of compliance to give some more indication to school and to operator on how to be compliant with all the requirements that are written on SORA. So this will cover for sure the training, but not only. Also for the other safety objective, little by little we are going to provide much more material in the next future.
Okay, and we've got a few people just commenting, asking, will the video be available afterwards? And yes, you'll be able to get it on the EASA YouTube channel. In fact, the one from yesterday for the open category for the private users is already available online, and this will be available fairly shortly. So you'll be able to record it, share it, play it back to other people, whatever, that's easy, and that will happen. So if we move on to another question now. Now Viva asks, with terms of the standard scenarios and the predetermined risk assessment, is there? Can you provide a bit more information about the difference between the two? And he asks, is it possible to provide templates for the PDRAs to help people? And I think that kind of makes sense. Yeah.
So repeating a little bit what I said before. So in both cases, there are a simplification to reduce the instances in which the operator needs to conduct the full risk assessment according to the SORA. So the predefined risk assessment are some scenarios in which EASA did the risk assessment. So in this way, you as an operator, you can check if this scenario fits your operation. So you will find in our acceptable means of compliance that are still in this big easy access rule. So as you can imagine, this document, easy access rule, is a quite large document, but there is a navigation pane on the left that helps you to identify, to navigating within the document. So within this document, you will find all the predefined risk assessment and all the standard scenario. So at this moment, we have only one, but by next week, there will be the 3 more. And you may use the predefined risk assessment to conduct, to ask for authorization, just by following a sort of recipe that is already written in this document. So it's a table that you will find in our document. So you just need to follow all the elements that are in the table and prepare the documentation to the competent authority accordingly. The standard scenario instead is a further simplification. The standard scenario are those special scenarios for which you don't even ask for an authorization, you can just operating using a declaration. But in this case, we are a little bit more prescriptive. So in this case, you find them as an appendix to the regulation. So there is Appendix 1 and Appendix 2 to the regulation. And you need there really comply one-to-one to all the requirements. It's let's say a sort of an extension of the open category, we can call. So at the end, the requirements are organized and are written similarly to the open category. So in this case, you just make sure that you comply with all requirements. There is no need to make any change to it. And more than no need, you cannot do to make any adaptation to them. And then you can just declare to the competent authority, and you can operate as soon as you receive the confirmation of receipt by the competent authority.
Great, thanks for that. And maybe coming to another thing we've had a few questions about is about where people can find information. So as more of this work happens that Natalie was talking about, things become available, we will always make sure it's published on the drones page of the EASA website. If you go to the website, you can actually sign up for updates so that when something new appears, you'll get an email, and that makes sure you won't miss anything, which is hopefully really useful and will be really important as it's a continually changing situation. So it's important that you can stay in touch and see what's happening. So if I move now to a question from Rickard, who asks, if he's flying a 15 kilogram drone and say mapping a road or a railway outside a city, the open category, or would he need to be in the specific category for something like that?
So 15 kilo drone, so it's below the threshold 25 kilos. So it depends on where you are operating. So if you are operating during day on a road where there is a lot of traffic, or where there is traffic, actually there need to be a lot, then no, you cannot do in the open category, because if your drone will, you have an accident, it will crash in the street, maybe we will not will not enter into the car, because the person will be protected by the roof, but still this may become maybe cause a big accident. So you cannot do in the open category during day, but maybe during night, why not? You can do in the open category. So the alternative will be that you do in the specific category, and then in this case you need to use a drone that is assessed such that is not posing any big risk to the traffic, or maybe you can define some procedures such that you are far enough to the street in order to avoid that the aircraft will fall down. And this is the big powerful tool that you have in the specific category. That it's up to you. So you can decide to buy a very expensive drone that will never crash, and then you can be on top of the street, maybe a very crowded street, and do your operation. Or you may buy a cheaper drone, and then you can show to the competent authority that you have a quite skilled pilot that is able to control the drone such that it will never go exactly over the street. And then you only show that your drone will have a feature such that in case there is a lost link or you lose control, then there is a termination system of the drone. So this is the way you can really accommodate your operation to make it in the cheapest way as you can, as it is affordable for you.
Okay, great. And in fact, a question we get then from Dominic, who asks, so obviously we've got the drone regulations coming in on the 31st of December. So his question is, how can he get his big drone pilot's license, as he calls it, before that and be ready? So how, obviously we've got this transition coming. How can you prepare our audience, perhaps prepare for that?
Yeah, so the regulation will become applicable from 31st December. This means that all the training that are called to the regulation will be possible only by 31st December. But however, for the first year, the competent authority will be allowed to recognize the current training that you have conducted according to the national regulation to be valid also for the operation within the specific category according to the European regulation. And in the first year, the competent authority need to assess the training that is based on the national regulation, and maybe they can also convert it. They can see that the training is already 100% fitting those it is required for the European regulation, and then they may convert one-to-one. Or maybe they may decide that you need to have some Delta training. So you need to be in contact with your aviation authority to check how will be the conversion of what today you have compared to the European regulation.
Okay, hopefully people found that helpful. It was really good. And so I have the chance to redeem myself. So last night I made the mistake of talking about a 249 kilogram drone instead of a 249 gram drone. So we've got quite a few questions on the situation if I have a 249 gram drone and I want to use that, say, for surveying in daytime above traffic. Is that okay? How would I do that? How does that fit into the regulation?
Okay, so 9 grams, this means that they will have a camera, because if you're doing some kind of surveillance, you will have a camera. So as we said yesterday, you need to register yourself. So this is something that I would like to stress, because in some other part of the world there is only the requirements based on threshold, weight threshold. In Europe we have also we consider privacy also very important for citizens. So you need to register yourself whenever you have a camera or other sensor that is able to detect privacy data. Then, depending on the area where you are flying. We said yesterday that with a drone below 250 grams, you can operate in the open category almost everywhere, but not where you are when there is a crowd. So if you are talking about a street, a motorway, so we expect that when there is a lot of traffic, so in this case you cannot do in the open category. But also the operation in the open category, we don't have many requirements for protecting the possibility that an aircraft will crash. Especially when you talk about a street, the problem is not very much that the aircraft will enter into the car because it has a very low energy, but will distract the driver where they are driving, and then will cause a lateral damage. Mm-hmm. So this is what we need to protect. So please do it not in the open category. So this means that you need to have some precise procedures in order to avoid that the aircraft will fall over the street. So this means that operation in the open category are those that so you can do operation not over crowds, but also you can not when you need to stay constantly over people, because then you are posing some kind of risk. So it's better that so the open category is only mostly for leisure in this case. All the operation need to do some kind of inspection where there are crowd, where there are populated area, where there are this traffic. You need to have some very good procedures to make sure that the operation is safe, so you are in the specific category.
Thanks for that. And there are what we have already on our website is quite a lot of frequently asked questions and answers, and as I said, we'll add to that. But certainly if you have, we see the different questions we get here, perhaps the first place you could look, if tomorrow you think, oh, I need the answer to something else, do look at the frequently asked questions on the EASA website, because a lot of the things that Natali's answering here are also provided there as well. But hopefully you're finding this quite useful, that to talk about these live as we go. So another one we've got, actually quite a few people were interested to know, is about reporting if they had some kind of safety incident. So is there a need to report, since we're flying an aircraft effectively, to report within the regulation 376 on occurrence reporting?
Yeah. Very good question, because this is a point that we need to cover. Yesterday I said that in the open category you don't need to report to the competent authority unless there is an incident that is causing harm to people, or unless the incident is involving a manned aircraft. And this is valid also in the specific category until you don't have a certified drone. So this means that if the competent authority does not mandate to use a certified drones, if you are doing the operation, you are having an incident, for example, you are bumping against a tree, for example, okay, we don't need to report. If you are crashing in an area without causing any kind of damage, you don't need to report. If instead you are crashing an area and you are hurting people, you need to report. And if for some reason you went very close to an aircraft, then you need to report. Instead, when you are using a drone that is certified by EASA, so with a type certificate and with certificate of airworthiness, in this case you need to report all accidents that you had, so all crashes. So here the regulation 376, for those that are a little bit more in the use with the aviation world, this is the regulation that they identify how in Europe report needs to be conducted within the aviation system. So in this case, the regulation 376 is fully applicable, and you need to report as you do for the manned aviation.
Okay, thanks for that. And moving on perhaps to a slightly different subject. So Jean-Louis and a few others have asked about if they're trying to find information about restricted areas and where they can and can't fly. Is there a single European database, or how would they go and find that information?
Yeah. Also, this is another good point. It allows me to remember that, as we said yesterday, member states may identify area where you can fly, where you cannot fly. So this we call geographical zones. And this applies to open categories, as we said yesterday, but to specific category as well. So first of all, you need to check on your National Aviation Authority website if in that area you cannot fly, or maybe if you need to have a special authorization, or maybe if you need to have a drone that is equipped with a special feature. For example, they can identify areas where only drones with special light may fly in that area for whatever reason. So at this moment, this information will be published in the National Aviation Authority website. As I said yesterday, we are developing an acceptable means of compliance to harmonize the way this information will be published. So to make sure that you are not confused when you are used to see this information on your National Aviation website, and you go to another nation, so there will be presented in the same way. But so this is a responsibility from the member state, and since they can do for privacy, for security reason, we need to leave to them the possibility to also, for example, it can happen that there is an accident, a road accident, and the police want to for 1 hour, for example, or over the area, because maybe there will be a helicopter that will come to rescue some injured person. So in that case, the member state needs to publish this information quite quickly. So it will be published on their website, and you need to adhere with them. So it's better that this will be done at the national level. Now, you are required, before starting the operation, to check that if on the website there is any other new zones that has been published, and in the next future this information will be transmitted to all the user of the airspace through what you may have heard the U-Space, that it will be the traffic management system for all operation in the lower area, so that will cover the traffic management, especially in the city at the beginning, but then in the future may be expanded. So the U-Space will provide some services, and including the spreading of the information of geographical zones. So in this way, as soon as the police, for example, will identify an area where nobody should fly, this information will be immediately spread, and all the operators that are in that vicinity will know that they need to avoid that area.
Thanks for that. And we have quite a few questions related to insurance, and particularly if you're a business. What's your thoughts on insurance if you're running a business using drones?
So I think that everybody should have an insurance, especially if you are a business operator. As I said yesterday, the European regulation, that is different from Regulation 947, but is another regulation that already mandates that all model aircraft, so include also drones, needs to be insured when they have a weight more than 20 kilograms. So when the weight is below 20 kilograms, there is no specific requirements to have an insurance, but there are other regulations in the different states that mandate the insurance. So this means that there are regulations that mandate insurance for all operator, even if they are for leisure or commercial, but there are also other regulations that mandate insurance for all commercial operation. So please check on your country what are the regulations for insurance, but I suggest always to have this kind of insurance.
Okay, thanks for that. And maybe we have a last few minutes. We got some quite specific questions. So, for example, Philip asks, so standard scenario 1 requires a C5 drone, and the proposed regulation for C5 includes the means for an effective UA impact dynamics. And he asks, what is that? Is that a parachute or something else? Can you provide some thoughts on that?
Yeah, good point. So when we said before the standard scenario, as I described as a sort of extension of the open category. So as we did in the open category, also here we will require to use a drone with a class identification label, and 2 new classes has been developed. There is the C5 and the C6, and also in the regulation you can find all the requirements for drones that need to comply with them. So some of these requirements are based on the C3 drone, like in the open category, but there are some extra requirements to protect the extra risk. For example, in the standard scenario, we allow in the standard scenario 1 to do an operation in urban environment with a drone up to 25 kilos. You may remind that in A2, in the open category, the limit is to 4 kilos, and you can fly 5 meters or 30 meters to people. Here, in the standard scenario, in the city, you can fly up to 25 kilos, but you need to, first of all, protect the area where you are doing the operation to make sure that nobody is walking in that area. And the drone will have a flight termination system, so a system that will terminate the flight when, for some reason, the pilot see that the aircraft is exceeding the area where it was supposed to operate, so it's going in an area where now there is actual population. And this system to reduce the impact dynamics. So this means that a sort of parachute such that the energy that the aircraft will have when it's falling down is reduced. So in this way, will not hurt people. And I want also to remind another thing. So standard scenario are only possible with drone with C-class SIM mark. But we know that several of you are using drones that are home built, so built by you for your own purpose. So within the documents that we're going to publish next week, we identified 2 predefined risk assessments that are mirroring the standard scenario. Where compared to the normal predefined risk assessment is even a more simplified way. So it's another way to do operations similar to the standard scenario, but without using a drone with a class C5 or C6. Now, you still will require an authorization to do these 2 predefined risk assessment, but the authorization process will be quite simpler than the one that is standard use.
Thanks for that. And so talking then about the different classes, etc. So somebody then has sort of a follow-on question is, when flying in the specific category, if you have a number of drones as part of your business, do you have to register every single drone? And then, is that just a single declaration? How does that work?
Yeah, so the registration of the drone is required when the drone has a type certificate and a certificate of airworthiness. So whenever you have a certificate of airworthiness, you need to register the single drone. So now, if you are using different drones that are without a certificate of airworthiness, so your registration as a US operator is enough. You don't need to do anything else. And as we said yesterday, you will attach on a single drone the number that you receive from your aviation authority that will be a sort of a car plate, like we have in the car plate, and will be linked to you. So all drones will have this car plate, this let's say drone plate. Instead, if the drone is as a certificate of airworthiness, then you need to certify each single them. When you are asking for an authorization or a declaration, then you need to specify what kind of drones you are having. Now, for the declaration, the standard scenario, since we are using always drones that are C5 or C6, so this means that are drones that does not require to have a registration. So you will only be required to identify that you are using this kind of drone. So you need to specify you do not update your declaration when you are buying a new C5 or C6 drone. When instead you are using an authorization, in that case, yeah, you need to specify what kind of drone you have and if there is a registration when it's required.
Fantastic, and hopefully you all found those answers and the questions. As said, we couldn't get through them all, but we'll put answers to the ones we couldn't answer on our website. Hopefully, our audience found that really useful. Huge thanks to Natali, for his expert views and opinions and answers there. I think it was really useful to have these discussions to get your inputs and thoughts. And I don't know about you, I thought that was really interesting. It was great to get this engagement.
Yeah, it was really my pleasure, and it's a pleasure of all the EASA drone team. We are here, we continue to support all operation in Europe.
And maybe one last thing just as we close out is to say that, I keep talking about the EASA website, but the material will be there. but we'll also, as we head into next year, be continually looking to have events and webinars and things like this, so that you have the chance to continually engage. We learn what challenges there are in the community of drone users, so that we work together as a developing drones community to really make this work, and really from our side help the drones world to grow and provide a great source of business and enjoyment for as many people as possible. So thank you very much for joining us. Thanks to Natalie, thanks to you all, and we wish you all a Merry Christmas, and hopefully we'll see you on one of these events soon. Goodbye.
Goodbye.